For thousands of years, there was this one civilization that didn't just see itself as a great power. No, it saw itself as the literal center of the world, the stable, ordered hub in a universe of total chaos. So today, we're going to dive into the story of ancient China, the civilization that actually called itself the Middle Kingdom.
And that name, Zhonggu, well, it's everything. It's so much more than just a name for a country. It's an entire worldview packed into 2 syllables. It tells you everything you need to know about the core belief that shaped like 4,000 years of history. And that idea, that this civilization was the anchor of cosmic balance, the very heart of the world.
So the big question is, how did this incredible worldview even come to be? Well, in this explainer, we're going to take a journey through 5 key stages to figure that out. We'll start by digging into its foundations. Then we'll check out the cosmic principle that said who could and couldn't be a ruler. We'll look at the moral compass that guided society, see how it was all physically hammered into one giant empire, and finally, we'll ask the big one, what gave this civilization its lasting soul?
All right, let's start at the very beginning. We're talking about the land itself and the values that grew right out of the soil.
So it all starts right here, along the banks of the Yellow River. And this river, it was a total paradox, a real double-edged sword. On one hand, it gave life with its super fertile soil, but on the other, it brought absolute destruction with these catastrophic floods. So if you wanted to survive this constant threat, you had no choice. You had to work together. And that right there is what forged the bedrock values of Chinese culture: discipline, planning for the long haul, and above all else, unity.
Okay, so the first major power to pop up in this environment, that was the Shang dynasty. And these guys were no joke. We're talking sophisticated city builders with absolutely incredible bronze technology. But the real game changer, they developed an early writing system. And get this, they used it on these amazing artifacts called oracle bones. They would literally write questions to their ancestors on these bones, heat them up till they cracked, and then interpret the patterns to get their answers. How wild is that? It just shows you this profound belief they had from day one. The past isn't just gone, it's always there, always watching.
Just to give you a quick map of where we're headed, we just touched on the Shang. Next up, we're going to jump to this amazing explosion of ideas in the 6th century BCE. Then we'll witness the critical moment of unification under the Qin, and we'll wrap things up in the golden age of the Han dynasty.
So you've got dynasties rising and falling over and over. And as this happens, a single, incredibly powerful idea starts to take shape to explain why. And this idea? It would become the ultimate source of political power for more than 2,000 years.
They called it the Mandate of Heaven. And the concept is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly profound. The idea was that a ruler wasn't in charge just because they had the biggest army. No, they were in charge because they were chosen by a higher cosmic power, by heaven itself. But, and this is the key, that divine approval wasn't a lifetime guarantee. Not at all. It was totally conditional on how good of a person and how good of a leader you were.
And you can see the idea laid out perfectly right here. If you were a good ruler, just and wise, you'd bring harmony and prosperity. Those were clear signs that heaven was on your side. But if you were a bad ruler, corrupt, or just plain incompetent, you'd get disaster. Famines, floods, earthquakes. These things weren't just seen as random acts of nature. Oh no. They were cosmic warnings that you, the ruler, had lost the mandate.
And here's the really crucial point, the thing that changes everything. The mandate of heaven basically gave the people a legitimate, cosmic reason to revolt. Think about that. Overthrowing a failing dynasty wasn't treason anymore. It was seen as a moral duty. You were just helping restore order and balance to the universe, helping heaven install a new, more worthy ruler. That is a truly revolutionary idea.
Okay, so the Mandate of Heaven explains political order. But that just leads to the next big question, right? How should we all actually live together to keep that harmony going? Well, the search for that answer sparked an absolute golden age of philosophy.
And the most influential voice to emerge from this period was, of course, Confucius. Now, he wasn't really interested in gods or the afterlife or anything like that. He was intensely practical, totally focused on people and the relationships right here on Earth. For him, the secret to a stable society wasn't about waiting for divine intervention. It was all about human action, respecting your elders and authority, understanding the importance of family, and this huge idea that a ruler has to lead by moral example, not just by brute force.
But Confucius wasn't the only game in town, not by a long shot. This table kind of breaks down the 3 main schools of thought that were competing. In one corner, you've got Confucianism, right? The idea that people are basically good and teachable and that order comes from moral leadership. Then you have Daoism, which was all about finding harmony by just going with the natural flow of things. And then way over in the other corner, you had legalism, which had the complete opposite take. People are naturally selfish, and the only way to get any order is with super strict, unbreakable laws and harsh punishment.
So for centuries, you've got these different ideas battling it out, all while China itself was completely fractured into a bunch of warring states. It was chaos. And then, one man comes along, and he uses that harsh legalist philosophy to literally hammer all those warring states into a single, unified China. That man's name was Qin Shi Huang. In 221 BCE, he did what no one had ever managed to do before. He conquered every single one of his rivals and unified China. And then he declared himself the first emperor. I'm not exaggerating when I say this moment is one of the most important turning points, not just in Chinese history, but in world history. And his methods? Well, they were brutally effective. It was this intense top-down strategy to forge a single identity out of all these different people. He standardized the money, creating one economy. He standardized the writing system, creating a shared culture. He standardized the laws, creating one single government. He basically forced this collection of separate states to start thinking of themselves as one people. And oh yeah, he also kicked off that little project that would eventually become the Great Wall.
But all of this unity, it came at a terrible price. Because he was guided by those hardcore legalist principles, his rule was completely totalitarian. He's famous for ordering a massive book burning to literally erase any competing ideas. And he had scholars executed just for daring to disagree with him. So yeah, he created China, but he did it through absolute fear and control.
Now, funny enough, the Qin dynasty itself didn't last very long at all, but the unified China that he created, that did. And that brings us to our final section, how the idea of China, its culture, became the thing that truly lasted.
So, after the super harsh rule of the Qin, the Han dynasty comes along and ushers in a true golden age. This is when the famous Silk Road really opens up, connecting China to the rest of the world and leading to this amazing flourishing of trade and new ideas. You get incredible innovations like the invention of paper. The government gets way more sophisticated. And for the very first time, Chinese culture really starts to spread and have a major influence far beyond its own borders.
And this right here, this is the core idea. Over time, being Chinese stopped being about loyalty to a specific emperor or some dynasty that would come and go. It became something much bigger. It became about being part of a continuous cultural tradition. It meant you were inheriting a shared history, a shared philosophy, art, and a language that was all carefully recorded and passed down from one generation to the next.
And just to put this all into perspective, take a look at this. While Europe was slogging through what we call the Middle Ages, China was in the middle of a technological golden age. And this isn't just like a small gap. We are talking about world-changing technologies, printing, gunpowder, advanced navigation that were already mastered in China centuries before they really took hold anywhere else. It was without a doubt the most sophisticated civilization on the planet at the time.
And through all of those cycles of dynasties rising and falling, these core values, a lot of which, remember, were forged way back on the banks of the Yellow River, they just stuck around. That deep respect for ancestors and for history, the social goal of harmony, the personal value of discipline, and a really profound reverence for education and learning. And that brings us to this powerful final thought. Empires fell, dynasties completely vanished, but China remained. And why? Because it remembered who it was.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? In a world that's always changing, what does it truly mean for civilization? Or, even for us as individuals, to remember who we are?